All right, everyone. Thanks again for joining us. My name is Sasha Chilkova. I'm a marketing manager here with Witham Digital. Today, we'll be talking about planning your move from Skype for Business to Microsoft Teams. As you've seen in our agenda, you know that Skype for Business is phasing out and Microsoft Teams is in. So let's just go over a couple of housekeeping items. We are recording the webinar. We'll try to keep the session to about 45 minutes. We'll leave 10 to 15 minutes for questions at the end. Please send in your questions. Don't hold back. You can submit them in the questions pane of the GoToWebinar control panel. Send anything you'd like to ask. We'll hold it till the end. If we don't get to your questions, we'll address them maybe in a blog post later on. And then the slides and the recording will be available after the webinar. We'll send out an email with a link to both. And with me today, I have Daniel Cohen-Dumani and Max joining me. And Daniel, if you'd like to kick it off, I think we can get started.
Sure. Good morning, and thank you, Sasha. And good morning, or good afternoon, everyone. For those of you dialing in from overseas, my name is Daniel Cohen-Dumani. I'm a partner and market leader for Witham Digital. I have a lot of experience with obviously Office 365, SharePoint, Dynamics, and the entire Microsoft Cloud. I'm very, very interested in productivity, the modern workplace, and really how to get organization to be more productive. And I'm here joined with my colleague, Max. Max, you want to introduce yourself?
Hey, good morning, everyone. So my name is Max Hervé. I'm a senior consultant at Witham Digital. I have about 10 years of experience with Microsoft technologies, started with SharePoint 2007, and then did some consulting around Exchange, Link, Office 365, and Azure. One of my interests in the field with the cloud services is being able to leverage those services to reduce your on-prem footprint. Right now, a lot of those workloads can run smoothly in the cloud, and we're able to migrate those to Office 365 so the IT can spend the budget towards, improving business processes, for example, rather than maintaining old systems on-prem. And yeah, one last thing, been working with Office 365 since the very first version, right? Since BPOS of release one of Office 365.
Great, thank you, Max. Welcome to the webinar. And a few words about Max. Max, I think before joining Witham Digital, you worked for Polycom, so you've been involved in large, what was at the time, Link deployment as well, right?
Yep, I worked at Polycom for a couple of years doing Link consulting for their consulting services. So yeah.
Great. Quick word about Witham Digital. We are a consultancy part of Witham Smith & Brown, who's a top 25 advisory and consulting firm. We are located all along the East Coast with offices from Boston to Orlando and covering clients all over the United States and even overseas in Europe as well. We've done hundreds of Microsoft Cloud deployment of Office 365, Power BI, Dynamics, Azure, and of course, Skype for Business and Teams. We have 4 Microsoft MVPs on staff, over 50 consultants in our Witham Digital group, and we've been a Microsoft Gold partner for over 16 years. So a quick word about what to expect from today's webinar. We can see from the registration, which almost hold any record here for us, lots of interest into this migration for Skype for Business. We'll start with the why. What's the evolution of Skype for Business and Microsoft Teams, the history behind why Teams is essentially replacing Skype for Business. What are the benefits of moving Teams and features that Teams offers that Skype does not? And some tips and insights for Max around how to best approach a migration from Skype to Teams. The objective, our goal is that at the end of this webinar, you'll have an understanding of the migration path to achieve a smooth transition to Microsoft Teams. You understand the migration options. There's a lot of options, a lot of different end user experience. And frankly, I think we'll talk about that. It's maybe not as seamless as one will hope. And we know Microsoft is working on that as well. You understand how to manage coexistence. A lot of our organization, our clients will have 2 systems coexist for a period of time, how to manage change and where to get started. Our topic is mostly technical today. We'll talk a little bit about the functional change management, and we are planning a follow-up webinar about talking, how to properly, from a functional and change management standpoint, drive with migration. So with that, Sasha, do you want to launch a quick poll here.
Yep. There we go.
So what we're asking all of you is to tell us where you are, right? Are you online, on-premise, hybrid, or not using Skype for Business? And while we're asking this, each of you will have different paths, and we'll try to cover all of those. As I would expect, most of you are online, many on-premise and hybrid. I guess those on-premise are either hybrid or both, or will become hybrid at some point. And a few of you have something else. I'm expecting maybe using Google or Slack or something else, right? So we'll cover the path for all of you, if you're not on Skype, if you are online, on-premise, or hybrid. Excellent. So let's keep going here. A little bit of history here. The roadmap, where did it all started? So for those of you that were here and using Microsoft technology in 2006, Microsoft introduced a tool called Office Communicator. Office Communicator was a client tool to do instant messaging. And Office Communicator had a server component called Office Communication Server. That was renamed in 2010 Link. So Link and Office Communicator were almost the same, and further renamed Skype for Business. You know, as you guys know, Microsoft likes to change name from time to time. So for about 11 years, you had the same product, mostly on-premise. Skype for Business, Link, and Office Communicator come from the same background. Of course, Microsoft started moving things to the cloud with BPOS in 2012, added Skype for Business somewhere in 2014. So Skype for Business became Skype for Business Online as well. And then in November 2016, roughly 2 years and a few months ago, Microsoft launched a preview of Microsoft Teams. And Teams was at that time slated to just be the collaboration tool to essentially compete with upcoming products like Slack and HipChat and others. So that was about 2 years ago. In March 2017, about 4 months later, Microsoft Teams became widely available, followed on September 2017 with an announcement from Microsoft with, that's created a lot of confusion about a year and some months ago, that Teams will actually officially replace Skype for Business. When they made an announcement in September 2017, Microsoft said, hey, we're not quite ready yet. A lot of things are not in Teams, but we're going to aggressively bring all the Skype for Business feature from Skype for Business into Microsoft Teams. In July of last year, Microsoft announced a free version of Microsoft Teams, and then in August, they've announced, hey, we've completed ahead of schedule all the move of Skype for Business voice and unified communication features to Teams. It's now available. You can now start the migration. And then coming this month, we have some additional features coming. Some were just released a few weeks ago. Some are coming. More advanced unified communication PBX feature that are not fully completely there in Teams yet, but are being released as we go. So what is Microsoft Teams? So for those of you that don't know, Microsoft Teams is a lot more than Skype for Business. Microsoft Teams is positioned as the hub for teamwork in Office 365. For a smaller organization, Teams can be all you need. It's the place where you communicate. It's the place where you collaborate. It's the place where you chat, have meetings, talk to people, share files, and be effective and productive for the organization. If you're a larger organization, this may be a part of your collaboration solution, if not the entire collaboration solution. Teams uses SharePoint and OneDrive and other Exchange capability behind the scene, right? So Team becomes your hub, the place to go to work within Teams and collaborate within the organization. It's deeply integrated with Office 365, of course, can be extended, customized with third-party applications, process, devices, bots, and allow you to work with confidence because Skype for Teams is part of the Microsoft Office 365 new admin center, jointly with Skype, but it's also part of the overall compliance, discovery, retention, and all the DLP capability that people expect. So you're secure, you're covered under the same, SLA as well as compliance and privacy requirements and capability that Microsoft has been offering for many, many years. So what are the benefits of using Microsoft Teams? All your tools are in one place: SharePoint, PowerPoint, Office, OneNote, Planner, Excel, and even third-party apps are brought together in a workspace, right? So a unified place to collaborate and work on teams. And you can have small team and soon very large team up to 2,500 users in one team at a given time. It's a place to do content collaboration, chat, discussion, calls, meeting, video conferencing. It's also a place to invite your customers to join. A few people will ask us, well, why are you using today Teams for your webinar? Well, Teams is not really a webinar tool and has a limit of 250 users today. For external, it's changing over time, of course, but it's mostly an internal where you can invite external parties to come on, but it's not really a webinar tool yet. There's something called Microsoft Teams live meetings that are coming in preview now, and we'll talk about that later on as well. It's a place to collaborate and communicate in real time, and information that historically will be lost in email and saved in discussion, right? You put them all into one place here as well. So when to use Teams, that's a big question, right? So when you think about the ecosystem in Microsoft Office 365, often people have too many choices, right? But one thing that we know is Teams is meant to be placed inside the company internal communication, things that are typically done by email, right? When you want to have discussion thread with a team of folks in the organization or ad hoc people, don't do it by email. Do it in what's called the inner loop, which is people you work on core projects and core initiatives, and that's done in Microsoft Teams. Email still has a place. If I wanted to communicate with you, if you're not on Teams, I probably will send you an email. But nothing will prevent me to try to find you on Teams /Skype for Business and get you on to have an IM chat as well. Email is a little bit less intrusive. Email is just urgent. And then Microsoft also positioned Yammer for a larger organization, the one probably more than a few thousand people would benefit from having Yammer as the outer loop when you want to connect with everyone in your organization. If you have 10, 15, 20, 40,000 employees, having a team for everybody is not technically feasible, but probably not the right place to do it. Yammer is that tool to do that. If you're a small organization with 50 people, Yammer should not be in your picture at all. Team will play that role very, very well. So why should you migrate to Teams? That's a good question. We believe that 2019 is the year where every organization will either migrate, if not consider the migration from Skype for Business to Teams. And there's a lot of reasons for that. The first one, feature and capability. One thing I really want you to take away from this webinar today is Teams is a lot more than Skype for Business. There's overlap. It does IM really well. It does video and audio calling probably a lot better than Skype for Business, more reliable, better backend infrastructure for that. But it's more than that, right? It's a rich, intelligent communication platform. It's a great roadmap, and Microsoft constantly innovate. There's releases of new capability in Teams virtually on a monthly basis. And by the way, Teams is where Microsoft is investing most of its R&D from a direct real-time communication standpoint. There's also user experience. It's modern. It's very rich. We're not going to give you a demo today for Teams, but if you're interested, feel free to contact us. Microsoft has invested in a state-of-the-art cross-platform and mobile experience. Teams can be used on your phone, on your computer, with an app, or from any web browser from anywhere in the world as well. And then Max, tell us a little bit about some of the operational performance that Microsoft has put in place with Teams as it compares to Skype for Business.
Sure. So Microsoft has completely redesigned the backend infrastructure for Microsoft Teams. So what they actually did is they took the code base from Skype consumer backend and ported that over to a brand new infrastructure and called it the Teams infrastructure. So very different than what you're used to with Skype for Business Online. Everything is going to be a lot more responsive. It's built from the Skype consumer backend. So you're going to see some improvement in terms of performance, in terms of usability. So you're going to get a more robust, modern backend. They're going to run some of those Azure services for you in the backend, such as cognitive services, right? It will allow you to do things like translate posts within the Teams channel, so that you're going to be able to leverage all those different services that are sitting on top of that backend infrastructure. What they also did in terms of routing for voice, so if some of you still have on-prem PSTN connectivity, now Microsoft has introduced direct routing from Teams to your on-prem PSTN with an SBC. So in the past, you could have done that with hybrid voice with Skype for Business, but that would require an on-prem deployment with the Skype for Business server and a connector. So now you don't need that connector anymore. You have the direct routing that Microsoft introduced. So that's going to help a lot of people who need to leave the voice on-prem for the moment. And the one last thing that they introduced in terms of operational performance is quality and operational metrics. So you're going to be able to track your usage through reports within the Teams and Skype admin center in Office 365. So as you go through your pilot, as you go through your upgrade, you're going to be able to get some metrics on usage and quality, for example, of call and user experience.
Excellent. Thank you, Max. And I want to insist and maybe translate in non-technical term what that means from a phone system connectivity. With Microsoft Teams, you're able to directly connect to some SIP providers that have been approved by Microsoft. Bypassing any capability, you will need either an approved SIP provider or using what's called a session border controller to connect to your own SIP trunk. So virtually, you could use anyone to provide voice service to you for Teams. You're not stuck with using Microsoft as it was in the past, right? So that's very interesting for a large organization that already have SIP trunking and wants to move. All you need is a session border controller, either hardware or cloud-based software, and here we are connecting your SIP trunks to Microsoft Teams. All right, so let's talk for a moment about the objectives of an upgrade, because that's really the core of our topic, right? If you want to upgrade, it's to enable your online user of Skype for Business to move to Teams. Maybe you have some on-premise, i.e. in your servers, on your installation, on your data center of Skype for Business, you want to move those to Teams. You also probably want to provide some interoperability and coexistence of the two. Maybe half of your user in Teams, half in Skype for Business. How can they communicate with each other? We'll talk about those extensively. And then empower your administrator to selectively move users. That's the great news with the team migration. You don't have to do it all at once. It can be selected. Of course, there's user experience challenge. Max will take us through a lot of detail about those. But essentially, when we talk about upgrade and migration, it's the same thing in this particular presentation and in our deck here. So we came up with 3 migration paths. I'm sure there's 10 more we can find, which are a combination of those. But essentially, there's 3 options. Number 1, you're not using Skype at all. Or you have a new tenant that you provisioned since October 1st. Why October 1st? We'll get to that in a second. Maybe you're on Skype for Business Online. Maybe you're already using Teams in both, but you want to say, you know what, we're going to retire Skype for Business Online because this product is going away at some point. By the way, Microsoft has not put a timetable for that. They've announced that both will be supported for a long period of time. But clearly, we understand that if you want innovation and new capability, those are not going to come from Skype for Business Online. So option 2 is you're migrating from online and maybe already using Teams, and what are the options for that? Lastly, you're either on premises or on premises with a hybrid deployment, maybe using some unified communication capability with your SIP trunk and so forth, And maybe you're already using Team as well. There's always an option with that as well. And we'll talk about the path from there. So Max, why don't you take us through those different paths and objectives, and I'll keep advancing the slide.
Sure, Daniel, do you want to move up a couple of slides here for the upgrade?
So the first one, by the way, and Max, I think we can collaborate. We actually added some slides last minute earlier this morning. We wanted to also cover the folks that you know, are new to Office 365. If you've deployed or provisioned a tenant since October 1st of last year, guess what? You don't have a choice. Skype for Business is not an option that now Microsoft is giving you. So we call it good news. Team is your only option. If you are new to Office 365 and you have less than 500 users, no option to select. If you are a new tenant and Teams is not in use and you have more than 500 users, we have a simple recommendation for you guys. You should consider Team and not deploy Skype for Business. There's absolutely no reason to embark in deploying a product that already been announced for about 2 years is going away. Leverage Teams, and I know that maybe it's overwhelming because there's more capability than that you want, but that's something we can assist you in finding the right way to deploy Microsoft Teams. Next is, Max, tell us about how do you upgrade from a pure Skype for Business Online to Microsoft Teams?
Sure. So just one last thing to add to your last slide, Daniel. Should also note that Microsoft is going to force some upgrades for the very small tenants out there. You're going to be able to postpone those different dates that they're going to give you, but they're going to switch you over to Microsoft Teams. So, you know, for the very small tenants, if that's your case, make sure you keep those notifications, you review those notifications from Microsoft, and plan that migration that's going to be essentially triggered by the Microsoft services.
Great one, Max. And by the way, you can also schedule your own migration on a push of a button. If you're small and you have 20 users and say, I'm done with Skype, I want Teams, push a button, gives you a date, it's scheduled, and it tells you exactly what to do, right? So, you know, for those small tenants with a few users, that's very easy to do.
Okay, so as you saw, there are different migration paths, based on what you're currently running versus you're running Skype for Business Online, or you're running a combination of hybrid or on-prem mode. So the first path here that we're going to show is your pure SFB online organization, and from the user perspective here. So your users currently have the Skype for Business client, right? So they have IM, meetings, and calling capabilities. So what you're going to be able to do is you're going to be able to introduce that Teams client to your end users. And that Teams client is going to come with full functionality. So it's going to come with the IM, meetings, and calling capabilities. It's also going to get, you're also going to get those collaboration features that are very team specific. So this approach is called the side-by-side approach. If you look at Microsoft documentation and things like that, they're going to call it as the island mode. But that's basically what it is. You have the two clients installed on your machine running at the same time. And Teams can do everything that Skype can do. And in addition, it can also do the collaboration. So this particular mode and approach is good for smaller sized tenants up to towards medium-sized businesses as well. That's something we're doing internally at Witham, for example. So it allows people to really get a good adoption of the Teams client before you can switch them over to a Teams only environment.
And that's great, Max. I think from a user perspective, it makes things somewhat confusing, right? So if I want to do a meeting, where do I go? Well, the answer is I can go to either or. I can go to Teams and schedule a meeting, and people will join it with Teams, or I can go to Skype for Business and schedule my meeting, and they will join it with Skype for Business. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, and you can join Teams meetings, you can join Skype meetings in your Outlook client, right? You're gonna have those two different plugins: the Skype meeting plugin and the Teams meeting plugin. So users can get some of those workloads shifted to Teams, and by leveraging those new features.
And then if we have, like at Rhythm Digital, we are using the Microsoft PSTN services, right? So that can only ring on one of the two clients, right?
Depends on the mode you're using, yes.
Okay.
All depends, yeah.
Got it. So for us, we receive phone call on Skype for Business from the outside world, but we can call people internally from Teams as well. So a little bit confusing, but it's an approach, right? And unfortunately for many of our clients, they went and started using Teams before Microsoft even gave us guidelines on how to do things, right? So a lot of you guys are probably in that mode already. Like it or not, we're there already, right? All right, so moving on here, oops, I have to go to the next slide. So what does that mean from an organizational perspective, Max?
So what this means is, right, you're going to have to push those Teams clients to your end users, right? You're going to have to maybe use some sort of GPO to deploy that client to your end users, and people are going to essentially have the Teams client and the Skype for Business client running on their machine. So just something to note here is Skype for Business client comes from Office Pro Plus, if that's what you're using as your Office applications. Teams is not part of Office Pro Plus. It's a separate download, separate installation. So that will need to be deployed separately, basically. And yeah, once you're driving saturation on Teams, you get a lot of good usage. So make sure you look at the reports in the Teams admin center to see how people are doing. You can start switching over people to Teams only. So that basically, we'll have a slide about Teams only afterwards, but that basically switches them to the end result, right? All the workloads are running on the Teams only. There is no dual usage of the two clients. You're only running one client, essentially.
Got it. So to summarize this, run both in parallel, get people to use Teams, get comfortable with Teams, and at some point turn the switch on, and still you can do it gradually, right? You don't have to do everyone at once as team only, right?
Exactly, yeah. So Microsoft gives you a lot of flexibility to move people over. You can do it at the organization-wide, or you can do it user by user. So you don't have to move everybody at the same time. And in the next few slides, we'll talk about interop, which is the communication between people who are running Skype for Business client versus people who are running the Teams client. So if you don't move everyone to Teams only right away, you still can have your employees, talk to each other across different clients.
Excellent. So what does that mean to be a Teams only user? Let's say I work in IT and I'm a pilot user and my company decided you are now a Teams only user. What does that mean for me?
So all of your workloads are going to run on that Teams client, right? So you're going to initiate and receive the chats and the calls from the Teams client. You're going to be able to interop with Skype for Business users. If you try to open your Skype for Business client, you're going to get what you're seeing on that screenshot here, saying that your organization is now using Microsoft Teams, and there will be a link that sends the user to the Microsoft Teams. So there is no confusion that can be happening here. Everything will be redirected to Teams. In terms of meetings, we talked a little bit about it earlier, but you'll be able to schedule all new meetings in Teams. However, you'll also be able to join the existing Skype for Business meetings. So when you move to Teams only, the Skype for Business client that you had installed on your machine stays installed. And that client that stays installed will allow you to join those existing Skype for Business meetings. So you'll be able to join both Teams and Skype meetings.
So an existing Skype for Business meeting, sorry to interrupt you, Max, means one of my clients is still on Skype for Business. They want to invite me. I still need that Skype for Business meeting client to be able to join an external Skype for Business meeting, right?
Exactly. I'll give you the full Skype meeting experience because you still have the client installed.
Or maybe it's someone in my organization that have not been upgraded yet.
Exactly. Yeah. If you still have people running Skype for Business, then they're not Teams only. They're going to schedule Skype meetings, and your Teams users are going to be able to join those meetings as well.
That's great. And then we can see that some data gets migrated. There's some feature like the meetings migration is not there yet, right? Or it's upcoming.
Yeah, so the meetings migration from Skype for Business to Teams is tap only. So it'll come out in the next few months here, but they will be able to automate that migration to Teams. Right now, essentially, you would have to recreate your own Teams meetings using Outlook.
So that's one to chat. If you want to move today, be careful because the meetings data migration isn't just available. Now, this was for smaller or less complex organizations, the one that are on Skype for Business online only. But by the way, this could be a very large organization too, right? They don't have to be small to be on SFB on online. But what happened for a larger organization?
All right, so this is going to be for, as you said, Daniel, for larger organizations. It's also going to be for organizations who don't want to introduce two clients that are doing the exact same workload at the same time, right? In a previous approach, you could do IM from Teams, you could do IM from Skype, you could do meetings from Teams, you could do meetings from Skype. So here we're going to separate workloads across different clients. And that first approach is called the SFB and Teams collaboration. So you're starting out with Skype for Business client, as we saw earlier, with IM, meetings, and calling capabilities. Once you start introducing Teams to your end users, you're only going to introduce Teams for collaboration purposes. You're going to keep everything that's UC related, so anything that has to do with calling and chatting on the Skype client, and you're going to introduce the collaboration, the sharing of documents on the Teams client. So we are going to have two separate workloads running across two different clients. Again, the end result here is to switch everybody to Teams only. So once you get that user to Teams only, you're going to switch over the IM meetings and calling workloads over to the Teams client. So it's just a different way to get there. Yeah, it's more recommended for, again, larger organizations typically, or organizations that are running on-prem or hybrid mode with Skype for Business.
And Max, that's a new mode, right? That wasn't available 3-4 months ago.
That's a very new mode. So for the technical people on the call here, you may not see that actually those options in the admin center yet. They're only available through PowerShell. So they have not been published to the admin center yet.
Okay, that makes it even harder. All right, so what does that mean from a organizational perspective? So I think the idea of this mode is let's not confuse our user base with two clients that have overlapping capability. But some may already be using Teams, right? So I think that there's a few options here, right?
Yes. So we've got a couple of variations here, but the first one you're showing here is for companies that have no prior Teams usage. It's not being installed anywhere, and they would introduce the SFB with Teams no UC approach, the one we just described. Start piloting people, and so moving people over to Teams only, and then growing that pilot essentially, so that eventually Teams only mode takes over basically.
Got it. So that's option A. You never use Teams. You're introducing it with limited functionality, and then after a certain period of time, hopefully not too long, you're moving everyone to Teams. And then little by little, Teams takes over. Now, for some large organizations, that may take some time, right? Obviously.
Right.
All right. Okay, the next variation, what is that?
So that variation is for organizations with prior Teams usage. So one thing to note again with Teams is if you don't make any changes to your tenant, you leave it as the default configuration, you're going to get that islands mode we discussed about 5 slides ago. So we're going to get that side-by-side approach, full Skype for Business client capability and full Teams client capability. So if you have some prior Teams usage and you've got some people already using Teams, you may actually want to leave that islands mode for those users, right? They're already using Teams, they have the full capability of the client, and you probably don't want to take away any features that they may already be using. However, for some of the other users that are not using Teams yet, you can introduce the SFB with Teams no UC, so the workloads on 2 different clients, and you can have those 2 different things going at the same time. You're going to be able to pick people, pilot people from that group and from the other group, and then they're going to start being able to move them to the Teams only mode and grow that pilot.
Got it. All right, so that's great news, right? You're not taking things away from people. And we've got some options here to migrate large organizations that have used Teams for some people, but not for everybody. And you can give some, some functionality that don't overlap for those users that have not been introduced to Teams. That's great. So tell us about the meeting option, because that's another twist as well.
Yeah, this one also has been recently introduced about end of 2018, and it's also only available in PowerShell for now. But it's working. It's available for your tenants. So this is called the SFB and Teams collaboration and meetings. So you start out with a Skype for Business client with IM meetings and calling capabilities. You introduce the Teams client for collaboration purposes, and then you start moving your your meetings from the Skype client to the Teams client. So Skype only ends up doing the IM and calling, and you're using the Teams the meetings capabilities on the Teams client. So what does that give you? Well, that gives you Teams meetings, right? So you're going to find out that Teams meetings are more robust than the Skype meetings. As discussed earlier, right? They're built on that brand new infrastructure, a lot more responsive. If you want to join a Teams meeting from a browser, you can just click join, and you don't need to download any plugins or anything like that. So you're going to get a better user experience. And some companies may want to start moving the Skype meetings over to Teams meetings earlier in the process here, with our end result of running all the workloads in the Teams client.
Fantastic. Now, so because we are now running things in parallel at a certain level of functionality, what happened from a coexistence standpoint? You have some users in Skype, some only in Teams. How about external users? Tell us a little bit about, the user experience during this mode of coexistence. We have two running at the same time, which I'm assuming a lot of you guys are in that mode already.
Right. So as you're saying, right, Microsoft is giving you a lot of different options to migrate over to Teams. About 5 modes that you can create, that you can use out of the box. You can also create some of the combinations of your own modes. So there's a lot of different options to get there. So you're most likely going to end up in some sort of coexistent mode where everybody is going to be running a different mode at some point. So as discussed, right, you're going to be able to manage that from the admin center or in PowerShell for those 2 latest modes that we discussed. The mode is going to govern the routing of your incoming messages and calls, right? So if you're Teams only user, you're going to get the traffic to your Teams client. If you're Skype for Business only user, you're going to get the traffic to the Skype client and so forth. You want to think about, what client you want to use to initiate those calls, what service you want to use to schedule your meetings. You want to look at the Teams meetings capabilities and see if that's something you're interested in, and if you want to start moving that workload to Teams already. In terms of coexistence mode, yes, so Daniel is showing the list of all the different modes we covered. This is pretty much a recap of what we discussed. The end result, again, is Teams only, right? It's going to be your final state of being upgraded, and it's also the default state for those of the new tenants under 500 users. And then you've got the SF with Team Collab meetings scenario, or with Teams Collab no meetings. So this is going to be for the larger organizations. You still have the SFB only mode. They still left that as an option in case you want to really postpone your Teams migration for you have specific requirements regarding the apps that you can deploy and so forth. And the last one is
only, Max, that SFB only mode is only for older tenant or for large tenant more than 500 that subscribe after October 1st, right?
It would be for the larger tenants. Yeah, that mode would not be available for those new tenants. Yeah.
And if I understand well, Island is where you are by default, right?
I'm sorry, Daniel?
The Island mode is where you are. If you don't do anything, you're in Island mode.
If you don't do anything, you're in Island mode, exactly. And as we said earlier, the Teams client doesn't come from Pro Plus, so you may already have users with the Teams client installed, and actually already running Teams and doing collaboration or IM and calling to the Teams client. So yeah, that's the default right now if you don't make any changes.
All right. So the good news also is there's some interoperability between Teams and Skype for Business. We see here a screenshot of someone in Teams talking with someone in Skype for Business, either inside or outside the organization. So that's possible. And the same is true for meetings too, right? So there's a lot of option to work together side by side. Once you have moved people to Teams only, they can still communicate and see presence and talk to other folks in the organization. And this is interesting. We can see here, I know it's hard, we can maybe zoom, and that's a screenshot, we can do a demo. But you won't see that in Teams that this person is actually in Skype for Business. And by the way, there's a lot of twist there. If you want to exchange a file or do a presentation, there's some twist there to be aware of that we don't have time to speak about too much today as well. Excellent. Well, that
was thing to add, Daniel. Sorry to interrupt, but for the interrupt mode, I would just say that it's a great option, right, to have people across different modes and so they can communicate back and forth between Skype for Business and Teams. However, you don't want to stay too long in that mode, right? You're going to find out that it's a little more limited than the Teams to Team native mode. So it's really more of a transition state that's going to get you to Teams only, but you're not going to want to stay in that mode for, like, let's say, 6 months or 6 or 9 months. This is not what you want to do. This is just to help you get to Teams only.
That's right. Very good. Yeah. All right. So thank you, Max. This was very helpful from a technical standpoint. Obviously, lots of options, more that we can talk about. I wanted to spend the next 10 minutes talking to you all about, what's your path? How should you walk about this? And introduce this concept of change management as well. One thing we know is people resist change. It's normal. We also know that a lot of organizations have what's called shadow IT, right? People just go online and buy a tool and start using it, right? So lots of organizations would have a lot of tools, and sometimes a tool fatigue. But if there's one thing to take away from today's webinar is migration to Teams is more than a technical migration, right? It's not just an on and off switch that you can just turn on and up. You are now on Teams. And then many organizations will have different way of absorbing change. Team is frankly a tool that's more appropriate or more widely adopted with younger generation, millennial, because they are digital natives, right? And I think that folks with, more experience, older, will have a harder time adopting this because they're not used to chatting and being on a texting all day long, right? Which is a lot of what Teams provide. We also know that, going too fast can create issues as well, right? So make sure your organization is ready from a technical standpoint, plan, pilot, deploy. The good news is you can, use internal groups within your organization to plan that. Different part of your organization, if you are a large organization, will have different needs. Understand who the people are in your organization, and be careful, communicate, right? Next thing you know is people start using Teams and they will say, why not me, right? Why can I use this system as well? You also have to manage change. Every organization capacity to change. There's a different threshold, and not often just because of who your organization is, but often because of the complexity of your organization as well. Grading from Skype for Business or other applications, don't give too much to your organization as well. Build an acceptance plan, how to generate excitement in your organization. Don't keep it a secret, right? Talk to the end user, communicate, hey, Teams is coming, it's exciting. Here's the plan, we're going to have training, we're going to have one-on-one session with our teams, we're going to do webinar internally, and get people excited and informed. Don't just turn a switch one day to the next. Play often what matchmaker to the readiness, right? Use a lot of different things. Make sure your help desk is attuned, that people answering the phone are aware, And you know what? Microsoft is giving you a lot of resources. There's an Upgrade Success Kit with sample templates. There's live training that Microsoft has given you. Often we like to help organizations build their own training plan. That's something we do as well. And then when you're ready, you've got a plan. Take it to a test drive, right? Make sure you understand how to do it, and that you have a plan. You use a pilot group, create champion within your organization, and those champions will help you guide this migration to success. A few things to talk about as well. I know that there was a few questions already. How about devices? Some of you may be using Skype for Business Online with Polycom or Yealink or audio code devices. Those devices will have firmware that are compatible with Microsoft Teams. As you can see, some already are, some not yet. And depending on the model of your phone, it may or may not support Teams down the road. So for those companies with large investment in devices, you will be able to keep your phone for basic, at least dial-in, dial-out capability, but maybe not all the advanced capability. There's also a mode called the Desk Phone PC Companion coming this quarter, or this half of this year, that would allow you to initiate a call from your computer that would actually use your desk phone to dial as well. That was something that was available for Skype for Business for many, many years. This is a picture of, and Max, that's your phone, right?
Yes, that's my Yealink. Mm-hmm.
So Max has been testing this new phone from Yealink, which is a Microsoft Teams phone. Has the team interface, you can chat with the phone, you can initiate meeting, and of course you can make phone calls, which is great. We've also been introducing to the marketplace a new capability with some of our partners, Logitech and Polycom and Crestron and HP and many providers, including Lenovo, are creating smart docks for Teams meetings, in advanced camera. Check if your smart devices or Skype room system devices are compatible with Teams. Some are there already, the Logitech one. Some like Polycom and Crestron are behind and will announce compatibility soon as well, right? So again, if you're using one of those devices, you can't yet do a full migration because the devices won't be ready for Teams support until later this year. Now, good news is Microsoft has done a phenomenal job giving us a lot of information. What we've tried to do in this webinar today is distill pages and pages of framework that Microsoft has created. Here's the link, aka.ms/Skype2Teams. You'll find a lot of what we've talked about today, from the project stakeholder to gather requirements, to defining your project, to assessing your technical and user readiness, and focusing on deployment implementation. If you are a large Microsoft client with access to the Microsoft Fast Track team, a lot of what I've talked about, the guidance and the architecture and some of the planning can be left to the Microsoft Fast Track team. And of course, we're here to help and assist in your new journey of migrating to Teams. So with that, I want to leave a few minutes for questions. Here's the key takeaway. This is much more than a technical migration. Number one, user may have limited discretion in upgrading to Teams, right? They don't control, and adoption is key to business value, right? So make sure you think about adoption, you think about training to your user, so that they are not confused, that they're not unhappy when you drive this migration. Managing user change is critical for overall upgrade success. Critical. And I cannot insist again that many organizations will think, hey, I can just put an engineer behind the scene and voila, we'll have a migration. It's not the case. Technical and user readiness planning should happen simultaneously. Don't only think technical, think about user adoption, help desk. Microsoft is providing great tools for you to manage your end-to-end migration. Max mentioned some are still using PowerShell. Most of it is in the front end in the new admin center. And then whatever, if you're coming from on-premise or online, there's a path to get from Skype for Business to Teams, right? And I want to warn you, sometimes they're not as great as we would have hoped. Guess what? This Teams to migration, Skype to Teams migration was introduced a year after the product was launched, right? So if you think about it, this is almost an afterthought. Microsoft didn't plan to do it when they launched Teams. They may have thought about it, but clearly they have not planned for it because those modes and those capabilities were introduced later on after the product was launched. And I think we see that in user experience. Good news too is you can customize the deployment path to fit your needs. So again, I appreciate all of you joining. We have a few more announcements and then we'll open up for Q&A here. We'll have a Skype for Business to Microsoft Teams migration from a change management perspective. We'll send you all detail about this. We're going to focus a lot longer on techniques for change management. What are the features of Teams? Probably we'll have a Teams demo as well. And then we are offering for all of you that are attending this webinar today and those that are listening to the recording, a free consultation offer. You'll have a link that will get sent to you. Click on it. It will actually schedule a meeting directly. And I promise you it will be a Teams meeting with Max and myself. So we'll give you an opportunity to have a chance to discuss your particular case and give you some insight on how to do it. So with that, we have a few questions here. So let's take them one by one. One about video conferencing available from outside client. Absolutely. If they have Polycom, you'll have to check the firmware of their Polycom software to join a Teams meeting. But if they're doing from a desktop client, you can use a web client to join a Microsoft Teams meetings from anywhere. And of course, if you have a mobile app as well. Few other questions here. Why are we not using Teams live event for this webcast? And guess what? I knew because I was ready for these questions. One, it's in preview. And I have to say, when it's in preview, we didn't want to take a bet that it would work. It's not perfect yet. We've been testing it for almost a month now. There's a few issues there, things we just cannot do yet. And that's why we're not using it. More importantly, there's no polling functionality, right? And we like to take polls when we do webinar, but we are, considering using Teams live events for our future webcast as well. Next question here. Let's see here. I'm going through the list here. What's the effect on Skype for Business phones? Like we said, I think, we will be able, you should check with the manufacturing of your phone. We know that Polycom, which is one of the leaders in phone for Skype for Business, has announced support for Teams. It's coming. Some of the phones are already supported. If you have a very old phone, you may be out of luck. So check with your manufacturing regarding phones.
Yeah, just to add to that, Daniel.
Yes.
So yeah, if you have Skype for Business phones, if they're compatible with Skype for Business, they should work for basic functionality with Teams. But in terms of the firmware, it could come from the hardware, right? Does the hardware support the Teams firmware, or does Polycom want to deploy specific Teams firmware for that phone? So as Dan was saying, yeah, it's best to check with the provider in terms of compatibility with Teams.
Yeah. We have one more interesting, thank you, Max. We have an interesting question about, is Microsoft Teams a viable alternative to audio conferencing service such as GoToMeeting? Absolutely. You need a audio conferencing licensing from Microsoft to do that, but be aware, not every Office 365 plan are compatible with audio conferencing. If you're on a business premium plan, you may be out of luck. You may have to use an external third-party system. Definitely, if you're on a business premium plan, you cannot use Office 365 as a PBX yet. Expecting this will change in the future, but watch your plan to make sure that. But yes, Teams is a great place to do audio conferencing. As a matter of fact, we instructed all our team members at Witham Digital to only do Teams meeting from now on, right? I think we want to make sure that we all attune to that as well. All right, so maybe we have time for one last more couple questions here. Is it possible to configure your Office 365 tenants so that new teams do not default for being able to be shared externally? The answer is absolutely. Contact us. We can walk you through that as well. The answer is yes. You can restrict external sharing for new teams, and of course for existing teams as well. Some may have to still have a manual configuration. We often work with organizations that wants to have automated teams provisioning with templates. So that's a way we can achieve that requirement as well. Has Microsoft published an official date for Skype for Business in Cloud going away? I don't know, Max, do you know about that?
No firm date from Microsoft yet. Only getting vague answers from them so far. So unfortunately, we don't have anything to share there.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think there's no official dates yet. And frankly, I think Microsoft will give us time, right? They've announced, I believe, a new Skype for Business server on premise, right? So they're not abandoning. My guess is it will be supported for 5 to 10 years. That's my guess. So you don't have to rush. But if your organization start to use Team and already have Skype for Business, we will highly recommend that you consider a path. Put a plan so that you pick one or the other. And our choice will be, of course, to use Microsoft Teams, right? Having two is confusing. You get IM on one and not on the other. Teams is a lot richer. And I can tell you, we're in that mode, so we struggle a little bit with that, right? I think it's a lot about user adoption and pushing and forcing our user to focus on one platform that's modern and that's here to stay. Well, I think we've got time for one more question. And that, I think, is a great question. So someone said he's working in IT, responsible for user adoption of Office 365, and currently in the process of migrating our user to Skype for Business. Ooh, but still have groups to deploy. Should we continue to migrate those users to Skype for Business or change our deployment? Well, it's hard to answer the question. I think I would say it depends. If you're a small organization, yes. If you're less than 100 users, finish Skype for Business and then plan the Teams migration. If you have thousands of users, maybe it's time to rethink it, right? Because moving from one to the other for a large organization will take time and pain. And if you just started to introduce Skype for Business, it may not be too late to change your plan. So, if you're interested, contact us. We're happy to, walk you through and give you some high-level ideas on how to do that as well. All right. I think we're running out of time. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Thank you, Max, for your very thorough contribution today. Again, you'll get a link. We'd love to hear feedback about this webinar. We're excited about the Skype for Business to Teams migration. We think that 2019 is the year for migration, and we'll love an opportunity to give you some advice, some guidance, and hopefully assist you in this exciting journey. Thank you all for joining.
Thank you, everyone.